Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Robert.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, Iran is racing towards the bomb. The fanatical Islamic Republic has ramped up its uranium enrichment and is speeding towards nuclear-grade purification that will allow it to obtain the atomic weapons which it claims it will use to destroy the Jewish state. The fanatic Ayatollah's regime has reversed the conditioned purification slowdown protocol, allowing Tehran to accelerate enrichment. The International Atomic Energy Agency warned that by removing this IAEA requirement, Iran can now triple its production of highly enriched uranium. The UN Nuclear Watchdog Agency said that Tehran is now producing up to 9 kilograms of uranium purified to 60% every month, enabling it to jump to the 90% needed for a nuclear weapon in just one short technical step. Israel continues to fight the Iranian-backed Hamas terror group in Gaza while simultaneously holding off Hezbollah in the north and combating the Iranian-funded Houthis in the Red Sea. Israel insists that it could preemptively strike Iran at any time before it unleashes its nuclear arsenal against the Jewish state.
The USS Gerald Ford has been ordered to return to its home port of Norfolk, Virginia. The nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and its strike group were dispatched to the Mediterranean Sea after the October 7th Hamas infiltration of Israel and the slaughter of 1,200 people along the border of Gaza. The Pentagon announced that other American warships and additional military assets will be deployed in the region as a deterrent to Iranian proxy armies wishing to destabilize the Middle East. U.S. forces have come under increasing resistance in the region. They've been attacked in Iraq and Syria, and dozens of ships have been targeted by Yemen-based Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in the busy Red Sea shipping lanes.
Deputy Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri was killed in a precision strike in a suburb of Beirut last week that is being attributed to Israel. The reported drone strike targeted a Hezbollah stronghold, killing 6 other terrorists as well. Aruri was a founding member of the Hamas terror group and was considered the leader of its military wing in Judea and Samaria. He orchestrated some of the most heinous terror attacks in Israel. Jerusalem did not confirm its involvement in the assassination, but security was heightened throughout the Jewish state, and the IDF was instructed to act at a high level of readiness on the northern border in preparation for retaliatory attacks by Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Pro-Hamas groups in America have blocked several major U.S. airports, wreaking havoc for holiday travelers. Anti-Israel protesters, many of them masked, donned Arab keffiyehs and flew Palestinian and Hamas flags as they blocked the entrance to several terminals at JFK and LaGuardia in New York and the Los Angeles International Airport. Participants displayed anti-Jewish hate slogans on their vehicles, calling for violence and another massacre of Jews. Protesters in New York faced off against the police, declaring that the NYPD and the KKK are one and the same. This is just the latest in a series of anti-Israel protests meant to disrupt the public order. New York Mayor Eric Adams insisted that the police step up their response to the pro-Palestinian riots.
Former Miss Iraq Sarah Edan visited the site of the Hamas massacre at Kfar Aza and met with some of the survivors of the October 7th genocide. Edan and her family were forced to flee Iraq after the beauty queen posted a picture of herself with Israeli contestant Adar Gandelsman. The family settled in California, and now Edan, who served as a translator for the U.S. military in Iraq, has announced that she will be running for a seat in Congress against the anti-Israel progressive agenda that was made popular by members of the ultra-liberal group known as the Squad.
Most Israelis support offensive action against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. A recent poll conducted by Lazar Research reflects that 68% of those questioned support military action to remove Hezbollah from Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Thousands of Israelis were ordered to evacuate their homes in northern Israel as the terror group continued to rain rockets down on vulnerable communities. The Hezbollah onslaught began one day after Hamas in Gaza began its murderous attack on October 7th.
The island nation of Papua New Guinea has announced that it will open an honorary consulate in Samaria, making it the first country to open a diplomatic mission in the biblical heartland. In September, PNG inaugurated its embassy in Jerusalem, making Papua New Guinea the fifth country to relocate to the undivided Israeli capital. During the ceremony, Prime Minister James Marape said that opening his country's embassy in Jerusalem was a sign of respect to the people of Israel. He said, as Christians, paying respect to God would not be complete without recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Foreign Minister Eli Cohen praised the Pacific nation for its friendship and strong support of Israel in international forums, such as the United Nations, where Papua New Guinea regularly votes with the Jewish state.
20% of Generation Zers hold a positive view of Osama bin Laden. A shocking new poll reveals that 1 in 5 Americans, aged 18 to 29, believe that the ideology of the mastermind of the 9/11 attack on America was a force for good. 7% of this demographic agree that bin Laden's actions were positive. Experts point to online platforms such as TikTok for the skewed thinking of Generation Z. The Chinese-run platform saw a rise in circulation of bin Laden's justification for the September 11th attacks that claimed the lives of 2,977 people in strikes on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and near Shawshank, Pennsylvania in 2011.
At least 9 IDF soldiers were wounded in a daring rescue of an 80-year-old man who was injured during a Hezbollah missile attack on a church in northern Israel. St. Mary's Church, located near the Christian village of Ikrit, was badly damaged by the Iranian-backed militia's onslaught. When Israeli soldiers entered Ikrit to rescue the injured, Hezbollah terrorists unleashed another barrage of rockets on the IDF unit that went in to evacuate him. One of the missiles was fired from within a mosque in Lebanon. 9 Israeli soldiers were injured in the mission. The IDF released a statement saying that the incident is further proof of Hezbollah's cynical exploitation of Lebanese civilians and holy sites for its terrorist activity.
And in business news, computer giant Intel has announced plans to build a new $25 billion factory in southern Israel. Nearly 10% of Intel's workforce is in the Jewish state, and at $9 billion annually, Intel's exports make up 5.5% of Israel's high-tech exports. Intel announced the expansion of its chip manufacturing factory in Kiryat Gat to the site in southern Israel, just 25 miles from the Gaza Strip. The company said it will be an important part of Intel's efforts to foster a more resilient global supply chain alongside its ongoing and planned manufacturing investments in Europe and the United States. This will be Intel's largest investment in the Jewish state and the largest investment by a company in Israel so far.
Israeli Olympian Artem Dolgopayet has announced that he will auction his gold medal and give the proceeds to the victims of the Hamas attacks on Israel. The athlete took first place in the World Artistic Gymnastics Championship in Belgium, just as news of the genocide on October 7th began to break. Dolgopayet ascended the podium to claim his medal while wearing the Israeli flag, marked with black tape in honor of the victims of the massacre of 1,200 people and the abduction of 240 to Gaza. He accepted the award on behalf of the State of Israel and for those killed.
2 IDF reservists serving in Gaza have discovered a priceless 1,500-year-old Byzantine artifact while patrolling a field near the Hamas-run coastal enclave. The soldiers serving in an artillery brigade discovered the ancient oil lamp buried in a muddy field. They immediately contacted the Israel Antiquities Authority, who sent a representative that identified the lamp as an ancient sandal candle. Sarah Tal, the IAA's archaeologist for the western Negev region, presented both soldiers with a certificate of good citizenship for reporting their discovery.
Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics has announced that the Jewish state entered the new year with a population of nearly 10 million citizens. The Jewish state grew by 1.9% in 2023 to 9.84 million residents. CBS noted that 73.2% of the citizenry is Jewish, 21% is Arab, and 5.7% is Christian and other religions and nationalities. Nearly 180,000 babies were born in Israel in 2023, and 45,000 immigrated to the Jewish state or made Aliyah last year, bringing the population to a total of nearly 10 million people. The Jewish state continues to grow and protect all of the religions and nationalities that reside within its borders.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned now for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Jonathan, your face is everywhere. You were working as a spokesperson within the military during your reserve duty. How was it to make the case for Israel when you're seeing so much anti-Israel sentiment in the media around the world?
I mean, I understand how important it is. There's the fighting, the real fighting on the ground, and then there's the battle of the narrative and the whole realm of information. Sometimes the battle of the narrative and information can be even as powerful and even more powerful than what actually happens on the ground. In this day and age, with so much media coverage, with social media and actions on the ground amplified with social media. So I think it's a tremendously important thing to do, and therefore I was very happy and honored to be part of that battle.
You know, you usually get questions about if we're doing too much to fight Hamas, but my viewers are more concerned if we're not doing enough. We're hearing reports that 3 of the army units are being pulled back from reserves, that there's less attacks by munition. Are we doing enough to get our policy through of wiping out Hamas?
11 out of 12 Hamas battalions are out of commission. There's still scattered terrorists that are able to emerge, fire an RPG or detonate an IED, and then go back into hiding. But there's fewer and fewer of those in the northern part of Gaza. And if you ask them, they're not having a good time, and they don't think that they have a lot of prospects for the future. There's still a lot of fighting in the south, and there you are correct. I think that the IDF has adjusted its posture a bit and that it's operating slightly differently because there are so many internally displaced persons there, and the IDF is very careful not to kill non-combatants. The world's watching. I think the IDF feels that we're very much under a microscope, and I think that we're making good progress. The IDF is making good progress in Khan Yunis. The next stage will be Rafah, and to cut off those tunnels. But taking personnel out doesn't mean that less force is applied. It means that these people will now go back home. They'll see their families. They'll have time to rest. Some of them will go back to working, and they will be ready for what comes next, if and when it comes.
Let's talk about what comes next. Everyone's looking at the north. Hezbollah has really increased attacks on our positions. It seems that every day there's an onslaught of rockets. At what point does Israel just say, look, we need to wipe them out? It's just too much already.
I totally agree with the fact that it is a situation that is unsustainable. And I think senior Israeli commanders understand that and say it. And I think that elected officials are on record saying that as well, understanding that the reality of October the 7th cannot be continued, and we cannot end the fighting with this being the reality. Israelis must feel safe to go back to their homes, and it must be a safe environment. And the worst part of Hezbollah, the so-called Radwan elite terrorists that they have, they're stormtroopers, which before October the 7th were deployed along the border and had the capability to cross into Israel but decided not to. They need to be permanently pushed back, and there need to be a big buffer zone, not inside Israel, but inside Lebanon, making it impossible for them to even get close. There's 2 ways of doing that. One way is using diplomacy, basically relying on the US, on France, and perhaps other international players, the UN, to facilitate some kind of diplomatic agreement whereby Hezbollah forces are pushed north. And if that doesn't work, we have almost 100,000 Israeli civilians that are refugees in their own countries. They need to be able to go back home, and if it's not done diplomatically, then it will be done militarily. And the IDF is gearing up towards that.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's Iran. You know, this is all being directed by Iran, whether it be Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis. When do we go after Iran? Iran just pulled a warship into the Gulf now. Why is that warship allowed to float? Why aren't we blowing it up? Where's our response to the Iranian threat?
Not only have they done that, they have actively fired at an international merchant ship in international waters, and we haven't seen any retaliation for that yet. They are destabilizing the Strait of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the entrance to the Red Sea, which has global ramifications. And of course, as you say correctly, arming Hamas, Hezbollah, the Islamic Jihad, and basically everybody else who is causing violence and instability in the Middle East. There appears to be somewhat of a disinterest in the West, including also in Israel, to actually take on what the former prime minister referred to as the head of the octopus and really go at the source of instability, violence, and extremism in the Middle East, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. But I think that what the Iranians are doing now, stage after stage, exposing themselves, escalating the situation themselves, I think this makes it more difficult for those who don't want to engage the Iranians, but eventually will be forced to do so. I hope that Israel will continue with what we've started doing now, which is actually making the Iranians pay a price in Iranian blood, because the Iranians are masters at sending others to fight for them. They're not so happy to fight for themselves.
Jonathan, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message would be first and foremost to say thank you. I know that almost all of the people who watch this are strong, real supporters of the State of Israel, of the Jewish nation, and I thank you for that. And I think you should be proud in how Israel is holding up. Israel is strong. We are committed to winning this. We understand what's at stakes here. We will defeat Hamas. It'll take months, maybe years in doing, but eventually we will defeat Hamas. And it will be a very clear message to all of these Iranian terrorists and proxies around us that if you mess with Israel, these are the consequences, and you will have to deal with a generation of trouble after you attack Israel.
Thank you, Jonathan, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
On October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists carried out the most heinous attack on Jews since the Holocaust. Within a day, Israel declared war on the Iranian-backed terrorist organization. The unbridled brutality began at 6:30 on that Saturday morning. The week-long holiday of Sukkot was coming to a close with the celebration of Simchat Torah. Many people were already in synagogues as news of the war spread throughout the nation on what is now being referred to as the Black Sabbath. Terrorists infiltrated Israel by land, air, and sea. They broke through the border security fence separating Israel from the Gaza Strip, destroying it with bulldozers and explosives. They used paragliders to fly in and rubber boats to enter by sea. Within just a few hours, 1,200 people were murdered. Israeli Jews, Arabs, Bedouin, and foreign workers from Thailand. 240 people were taken hostage. The prisoners included 32 children, one of whom was just 9 months old. Sirens screamed across Israel as rockets slammed into towns and cities. Villages were pilfered, set on fire, homes looted and robbed by civilians from Gaza, while Jews were being raped and massacred. Israelis tried to secure themselves in protected rooms with steel doors. They never imagined they would need to hold on to the inside door handles to keep Hamas terrorists from entering. One particularly heinous incident unfolded at a concert in Israel's south, where Hamas terrorists murdered and abducted partygoers that had camped out in the desert for what was supposed to be a weekend music festival celebrating peace. 360 people were killed and some were taken by force into Gaza. Witnesses reported horrifying details, including sexual assaults and brutal, unimaginable murders, as disoriented partygoers tried to escape the violence. Videos filmed by Hamas terrorists showed hostages being hauled away at gunpoint onto trucks, motorcycles, and small all-terrain vehicles. Back in Gaza, local residents cheered and celebrated as Hamas terrorists paraded dead Jews and terrified survivors through the streets. Hamas targeted 22 locations in southern Israel. The city of Sderot and its police station were taken over. This resilient community has endured 25,000 rocket attacks since 2005, when Israel pulled all of the Jewish residents out of the Gaza Strip in an effort to gain peace in what was known as disengagement. Israel's strongest ally, the United States of America, showed its support, standing unequivocally with the Jewish state. Within 1 week following the outbreak of war, America deployed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the region and warned any enemies of Israel to stand down or else. Nevertheless, Iran's proxy army, Hezbollah, fired scores of rockets into northern Israel. The terrorist militia began its attacks within days of the outbreak of war. In addition, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen launched weaponized drones and fired rockets and missiles at U.S. military bases in the region. An American warship intercepted and shot down 4 cruise missiles and 15 drones during a 9-hour period. U.S. military sites in Iraq and Syria were also targeted, injuring dozens of U.S. personnel. Evacuation from Israel's south was already underway from the Hamas rockets when it became necessary to order residents in northern Israel to leave their homes as well due to the Hezbollah attacks. There are now 200,000 Israeli refugees living dispersed throughout the nation. It is crucial to note that Iran, a known state sponsor of terrorism, provides more than just financial support to Hamas. Hamas terrorists are believed to have trained for the October 7th attack on Iranian soil. Reports reveal that 500 Hamas gunmen, along with terrorists from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, conducted training exercises in September with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The genocidal attack launched by Hamas on October 7th was horrifying and shocking. The Jewish people's response was quick and decisive. Within hours of the news, more than 300,000 IDF reservists began reporting for duty. Jewish and Christian communities worked tirelessly to raise and distribute funds to purchase protective gear, such as bulletproof vests and helmets. Others organized international prayer rallies and demonstrations in support of Israel. Hamas made a fatal mistake in thinking they could annihilate the Jews in Israel. Israelis and the global Jewish community are more unified than ever before in the fight against these demonic terrorists. In the end, it will be Hamas who is wiped off the face of the map. Israel and the freedom-loving world will then be better off. Up next, the ICJ Report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
We are here in Kibbutz Be'eri. A few months ago, this place here was considered one of the most paradisic, beautiful places in all of Israel. It was a place where young families from all over Israel decided to move here because it was such a peaceful, quiet, beautiful area to live, especially as a young family. Since October 7, everything changed. Since October 7, this place became an empty spot. You see, there's nobody living here in this area. It is a place of devastation. 240,000 people in Israel today are refugees, are evacuees all across Israel. And the Christian Embassy is here on the ground in order to help those evacuees with all the daily need what they are needing. And please have a look what the Christian Embassy is carrying out right now in Israel.
In these very difficult and painful times in Israel right now, we're so glad that God called ICJ to be especially here also for times like this, to be on the ground and to be your hands and feet, to stand with the people, to reach out to them, to be however we can in practical ways a comfort to the people. What we need right now is food, food, and food.
We are today in the center of Israel, and as you can see here behind me, we are packing food for evacuated families, and this is an ongoing effort that we do with other Israeli companies.
For me, being here today in this storage room or in this packing room means really to stand side by side with the Jewish people, with the nation of Israel, to help and to really be practical, to really be the hands and feet of Jesus, and really to support and to help and to bless.
That ICJ is here in this time and that we've decided that we're staying, that speaks wonders to the Jewish people.
Dear friends, in this time of crisis, when so many families are being evacuated from the south of Israel, and many of them are leaving with just the clothes on their back, there's a great need for food items and toiletries and clothing and toys for children and many other things. But if we are not able to get those items that are donated to the families, then we haven't accomplished our mission. When we were approached and asked to supply a second truck to make those deliveries, we knew right away that this was something that we could do to help. And I want to say thank you to all of our friends around the world for making it possible to meet this need and many others during this crisis.
We see already many shortages in the stores, and we are here in a huge storeroom. We want to put much more food here so that we can reach out to people, if it's the elderly, if it's the evacuees that came from the south and will also come from the north, and that we can help them to feed them at least. So we want to ask all of you who are standing with Israel at this time, please help us fill our hands so that our feet can go wherever we need to go in order to be your hands and feet. Thank you. We do it all together.
240,000 evacuees, not only here from Kibbutz Be'eri, but from many other communities around the Gaza envelope, and also from the northern region that we're bordering to Lebanon. Those evacuees, they urgently need help. They have been dislocated from their houses, they have been dislocated from their familiar home ground here, from the schools, from the playgrounds of their children. And the Christian Embassy committed to stand with them in these difficult times. We ask you to prayerfully consider to support the work of the Christian Embassy as we are standing with those people who lost overnight their home and their being here in this beautiful neighborhood. God bless you as you do so.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elron, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.